The alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 3 years. Lisa rolled over and hit the snooze button, stealing 5 more precious minutes of sleep before her day would officially begin. The small apartment was quiet except for the gentle breathing of her 2 children still fast asleep in their shared bedroom down the hall. She dragged herself out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen, her bare feet cold against the linoleum floor. The coffee maker gurgled to life as she pressed the button, a sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. While waiting for the coffee to brew, she peered out the window at the empty street below. The neighborhood was still wrapped in the peaceful silence of early morning, with only a few porch lights flickering in the distance. Lisa had learned to cherish these quiet moments before the chaos of the day took over. Being a single mother meant wearing multiple hats, and some days she felt like a circus performer juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle. But she had found her rhythm over the years, and mornings like this reminded her that she was stronger than she ever thought possible. After her first cup of coffee, she tiptoed down the hallway to check on her kids. 8-year-old Jake was sprawled across his bed like a starfish, his favorite superhero blanket tangled around his legs. His little sister Amy, just 6 years old, was curled up in a perfect ball, clutching her worn teddy bear. Lisa smiled and gently closed their door. They would sleep for another hour before she had to wake them for school. The uniform hanging in her closet was pressed and ready, just like always. Navy blue shirt, black pants, and the security badge that read Riverside Elementary School in bold letters. She had ironed it the night before, a small ritual that helped her feel prepared and professional. The job might not pay as much as she hoped, but it was steady work with decent benefits, and most importantly, it allowed her to be home when her children needed her. As she got dressed, Lisa thought about the promotion opportunity that had been dangling in front of her for months. Head of security would mean a significant pay raise and better hours. It would mean finally being able to move her family to a nicer apartment, maybe even one with a small yard where the kids could play. It would mean not having to choose between buying groceries and paying the electric bill. The drive to work took exactly 12 minutes, a route she could navigate with her eyes closed. She passed the same landmarks every day: the corner store, with the faded awning, the bus stop where elderly Mrs. Chen waited every morning at 7:15 sharp, and the billboard advertising a car dealership that promised no credit, no problem. She often wondered if that was true, since her own credit had taken a beating during the divorce. Riverside Elementary School came into view as she turned the final corner. The building was nothing fancy, just a typical single-story brick structure that had been educating children for over 40 years. But to Lisa, it represented stability and purpose. She pulled into the staff parking lot and grabbed her lunch bag from the passenger seat. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich, an apple, and a small bag of chips. The same lunch she packed for herself, every day, saving the fancier options for her children's school lunches. The morning air was crisp as she walked toward the main entrance. Spring was finally arriving after a long winter, and she could see tiny buds forming on the trees scattered around the school grounds. The custodian, Mr. Rodriguez, was already at work, replacing a burnt-out light bulb near the front door. They exchanged their usual morning greeting, a simple nod and smile that spoke of mutual respect between people who understood the value of honest work. Inside the school, the hallways echoed with the hollow sound of her footsteps. In a few hours, these same corridors would be filled with the laughter and chatter of over 300 children. But for now, they belonged to the small crew of early arriving staff members who kept the school running smoothly. Lisa's first task was always the same: a complete walkthrough of the building to ensure everything was secure. She checked every door, every window, and every potential entry point. It might seem like overkill in a quiet suburban elementary school, but she took her job seriously. These children deserved to feel safe while they learned and played, and she was determined to make sure that happened. The teacher's lounge was already occupied by Mrs. Peterson, a veteran 4th-grade teacher who had been at the school longer than anyone could remember. She looked up from her stack of papers and waved at Lisa through the window. These small interactions with the staff had become some of the highlights of Lisa's day. She wasn't just a security guard. She was part of a team that cared about these kids. As she continued her rounds, Lisa thought about her own children and how they would spend their day at their own school across town. Jake had a math test he had been studying for all week, and Amy had show and tell where she planned to present her collection of interesting rocks. Simple childhood moments that Lisa was determined to protect and nurture, even if it meant working extra hours or cutting corners in other areas of her life. The morning sun was starting to stream through the classroom windows, creating patterns of light and shadow on the polished floors. Soon the buses would start arriving, and the peaceful silence would give way to the beautiful chaos of children beginning their day. Lisa positioned herself near the main entrance, ready to greet the students with a smile and a friendly wave. She had no way of knowing that in just a few hours, her entire world would be turned upside down. She couldn't predict that a single moment of instinct and courage would cost her everything she had worked so hard to build. All she knew was that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The first school bus appeared in the distance, its yellow form cutting through the morning haze like a beacon of routine and normalcy. Lisa straightened her shoulders and prepared for another ordinary day at Riverside Elementary School, completely unaware that by sunset, she would discover just how extraordinary ordinary people can be when faced with impossible choices. The afternoon sun was shining brightly as Lisa walked her usual patrol around the school grounds. It was 2:15 p.m., and the sounds of children playing during recess filled the air with joy and laughter. Kids were scattered across the playground, some swinging on the monkey bars, others playing tag, and a group of fourth graders had organized an impromptu soccer game near the fence. Lisa smiled as she watched them play. This was her favorite part of the day, seeing these children simply being kids without a care in the world. 10-year-old Maya was sitting on a bench reading a book, completely absorbed in her story while her friends played around her. The little girl had always been different from the others, preferring quiet activities to the chaos of playground games. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The spring weather had brought everyone outside, and even the teachers on duty looked relaxed as they chatted near the basketball court. Mrs. Johnson was helping a first grader tie his shoelaces, while Mr. Thompson refereed a heated discussion about the rules of Foursquare. Lisa checked her watch and made a mental note to do one more sweep of the building before her shift ended. She was already thinking about picking up her own children and helping Jake with his homework when she got home. Amy had been asking for help with her art project all week, and tonight seemed like the perfect time to sit down and work on it together. The peaceful afternoon was suddenly shattered by the screech of car tires on asphalt. Lisa's head snapped toward the street that ran alongside the school property. A dark sedan had come to an abrupt stop, its engine still running. She could see two figures inside the car, but something felt wrong. Her training kicked in immediately, and every muscle in her body tensed as she moved closer to get a better view. The passenger side window rolled down slowly. Time seemed to move in slow motion as Lisa realized what was happening. Her heart hammered against her chest as she saw the barrel of a gun emerge from the car window. This wasn't supposed to happen here. Not at this quiet little elementary school where the biggest excitement was usually a fire drill or a surprise birthday party in the cafeteria. "Get down," she shouted at the top of her lungs, her voice carrying across the playground. But the children didn't understand. Some looked at her with confusion, others kept playing, and a few started walking toward her, thinking it was some kind of game. The first shot rang out like thunder. Chaos erupted instantly. Children screamed and scattered in every direction like frightened birds. Teachers started running toward their students, shouting instructions that were lost in the panic. The organized afternoon had transformed into pure terror in the span of a heartbeat. Lisa's eyes swept across the playground, trying to account for every child she could see. Most of the kids were running toward the building or taking cover behind playground equipment, their natural instincts telling them to hide. But there, standing frozen in the middle of the chaos, was Maya. The little girl who loved books more than games was paralyzed with fear. She stood exactly where she had been sitting moments before. Her book dropped at her feet, her eyes wide with terror. She wasn't running, wasn't moving, wasn't even crying. She was just standing there like a statue while dangerous chaos swirled around her. Lisa could see the gun being aimed again. The people in the car weren't targeting anyone specific. They were just shooting randomly at the school. But Maya was directly in their line of sight, a small figure standing alone in an area where a bullet could easily reach her. Every protocol Lisa had ever learned screamed at her to secure the building first. Her training manual was clear. An emergency situation. The security guard's primary responsibility was to lock down the school and call for backup. She should run to the main office, activate the emergency procedures, and coordinate with law enforcement. But Maya was going to die. There wasn't time to follow protocol. There wasn't time to think about procedures or liability or consequences. There was only time to act, and Lisa's heart made the decision before her brain could argue with it. She ran. Her feet pounded against the concrete as she sprinted across the playground. The distance felt like miles, even though it was only 50 yards. Every step seemed to take forever, and she could hear another shot being fired somewhere behind her. Children were still screaming, teachers were still shouting, but all Lisa could focus on was reaching Maya before it was too late. The little girl finally seemed to wake up from her frozen state just as Lisa reached her. Maya's eyes met hers for a split second, and Lisa could see the pure terror there. Without hesitation, Lisa wrapped her arms around the child and tackled her to the ground, using her own body as a shield. They hit the ground hard, and Lisa felt something burn across her shoulder like a white-hot poker. The bullet that would have struck Maya square in the chest had instead grazed Lisa's shoulder, tearing through her uniform shirt and leaving a trail of fire across her skin. The pain was immediate and intense, but she didn't let go of Maya. She kept the little girl pressed against the ground, covering her completely while more shots echoed around them. Lisa could feel warm blood soaking through her shirt, but Maya was breathing beneath her, alive and unhurt. "Stay down, sweetheart," Lisa whispered into Maya's ear, trying to keep her voice calm despite the chaos. "I've got you. You're going to be okay." The shooting seemed to last forever, but it was probably only 30 seconds before the car sped away, leaving behind a scene of terror and confusion. Lisa could hear sirens in the distance getting closer by the second. Someone had called for help, and law enforcement was on the way. She slowly lifted herself up to check on Maya, who was shaking but unharmed. The little girl looked up at Lisa with tears streaming down her face, but she was alive. That was all that mattered in that moment. As Lisa helped Maya to her feet, she could see other teachers gathering the remaining children and moving them to safety. The immediate danger was over, but Lisa knew that everything had changed. The decision she had made in those critical seconds would have consequences that reached far beyond this terrifying afternoon. Her shoulder throbbed with pain, and blood was dripping down her arm, but Maya was safe. Standing there in the aftermath of violence, holding a traumatized but living child, Lisa realized she would make the same choice again without hesitation. Some things were worth more than following rules, and a child's life was definitely one of them. The emergency room at City General Hospital buzzed with activity as Lisa sat on the examination table, a nurse cleaning the bullet wound on her shoulder. The antiseptic stung worse than the actual injury, but she barely noticed. Her mind kept replaying the events of the afternoon over and over again like a movie stuck on repeat. "You're very lucky," the doctor said as he examined the wound. "The bullet just grazed you. A few inches lower and we'd be having a very different conversation." He began applying gauze and medical tape with practiced efficiency. "You'll need to keep this clean and dry for the next few days. Come back if you notice any signs of infection." Lisa nodded, but she wasn't really listening. Through the thin hospital curtain, she could hear Maya's parents talking to another doctor. The little girl was physically fine, just shaken up, but her parents were understandably upset. Their voices carried a mixture of gratitude and anger that Lisa understood completely. Her phone had been buzzing nonstop since the ambulance arrived. Text messages from worried friends, missed calls from her children's school wanting to know if she would be late picking them up, and several calls from numbers she didn't recognize. But the call that came at 4:30 p.m. was the one that changed everything. "Lisa, this is Principal Harrison. I need you to know that we're all grateful for what you did today." His voice sounded strained, like he hadn't slept in days even though it had only been a few hours. "Maya is safe because of your quick thinking and courage." Lisa felt a small wave of relief. Maybe everything would be okay after all. Maybe her supervisor would understand that she had made the right choice under impossible circumstances. However, Principal Harrison continued, and Lisa's heart sank at that single word. I've been in meetings with the district office and our legal team all afternoon. There are some serious concerns about the liability issues surrounding your actions today. The words hit her like a physical blow. Liability issues? You left your assigned post without authorization. According to district policy, security personnel are required to secure the building and coordinate with law enforcement rather than engage directly with threats. I know your intentions were good, but the lawyers are worried about lawsuits. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. A child's life was in danger. I saved her life. I know, and personally I think you're a hero. But the district office sees it differently. They're concerned that if we support your actions, it sets a precedent that could expose the school system to legal action. What if you had been killed? What if other children had been hurt while you were away from your post? The room started spinning around Lisa. Are you saying I'm in trouble for saving a child? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, Lisa. Your employment with the district is terminated effective immediately. You'll receive your final paycheck by mail within 2 weeks. The phone went dead, leaving Lisa staring at the device in disbelief. Around her, the hospital continued its normal rhythm of beeping machines and hurried footsteps. But for Lisa, everything had stopped. She had been fired. Not disciplined, not suspended, but fired completely. The nurse returned with discharge papers and pain medication. Is there someone who can drive you home? You shouldn't be operating a vehicle with that pain medication in your system. Lisa wanted to laugh, but she was afraid it would come out as crying instead. Drive home to what? To unemployment? To bills she couldn't pay? To explaining to her children that mommy lost her job because she saved someone's life? She called her neighbor, Mrs. Williams, who had been watching Jake and Amy since the school called about the incident. The older woman arrived within 20 minutes, her face creased with worry and confusion. I saw it on the news, Mrs. Williams said as she helped Lisa into the passenger seat of her old Honda. They said there was a shooting at the school, but they didn't mention what you did. Are you okay, honey? Lisa stared out the window as they drove through her neighborhood. The houses looked the same as they had that morning, but everything felt different now. I saved a little girl's life, and they fired me for it. Mrs. Williams nearly swerved off the road. They what? Protocol violation, liability issues. I'm unemployed, Mrs. Williams. I have no idea how I'm going to pay rent next month. The older woman was quiet for a moment, processing this information. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You're a hero, Lisa. What you did today was incredible. But heroes didn't get eviction notices, Lisa thought to herself. Heroes in movies got medals and recognition and happy endings. Real-life heroes apparently got fired and worried about paying their electric bills. When they pulled into Lisa's apartment complex, she could see Jake and Amy waiting by the window. Their faces lit up when they saw her, and they came running outside before she could even get out of the car. Mom, are you okay? Mrs. Williams said you got hurt at work. Amy wrapped her small arms around Lisa's legs, careful not to touch her injured shoulder. Jake, trying to be the man of the house at 8 years old, looked serious and worried. What happened? Why's your arm in a sling? Lisa knelt down to their level, wincing from the movement. How do you explain to children that sometimes doing the right thing comes with a terrible price? How do you tell them that their mother is now unemployed because she chose to save someone else's child? There was an emergency at school today and I helped keep everyone safe. I got a little hurt, but I'm going to be fine. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But we need to have a talk about some changes that are coming. That evening, after the children were finally asleep, Lisa sat at her kitchen table surrounded by bills and bank statements. Her savings account had exactly $347 in it. Her rent was $200 a month. Her car payment was $298. Groceries, utilities, insurance, and all the other expenses of raising 2 children alone added up to more than she could handle without a steady income. She picked up her laptop and started searching job websites, but her heart wasn't in it. Who would hire a security guard who had been fired for protocol violations? Even if her intentions were good, even if she had saved a life, her employment record now showed termination for cause. The local news was playing on the small TV in the corner, and Lisa looked up when she heard the reporter mention Riverside Elementary School. The story focused on the shooting itself and the quick response of law enforcement. There was no mention of her actions, no recognition of what she had done. To the outside world, she was invisible. As she closed the laptop and prepared for another sleepless night, Lisa wondered if she had made the right choice. Maya was alive and safe at home with her parents, but Lisa's own children were now facing an uncertain future because of her split-second decision. She touched the bandage on her shoulder and tried to imagine making a different choice. Could she have lived with herself if she had followed protocol while Maya died? The answer was clear, even as her bank account dwindled and the bills piled up around her. Some things were worth more than financial security, but that knowledge didn't make the consequences any easier to bear. 3 weeks had passed since the shooting, and Lisa's world had crumbled piece by piece like a house of cards in a strong wind. She sat at her kitchen table at 2 a.m., staring at a stack of bills that seemed to grow taller every day. The red, past, due stamps on most of them glowed like warning signs in the dim light from her phone screen. Sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford, not because she was working, but because worry kept her awake every night. Her shoulder had healed nicely, but the wound to her pride and security felt like it was getting deeper every day. She had applied to over 40 jobs in the past 3 weeks, and the responses were always the same: polite rejections or complete silence. The problem wasn't her qualifications or experience, the problem was the phone calls. Every potential employer contacted Riverside Elementary for references, and every time they did, they heard the same story. Employee terminated for protocol violation during emergency situation. The Human Resources Department was careful with their words, but the message was clear. Lisa was a liability, someone who couldn't be trusted to follow rules. She had tried explaining her side of the story during interviews, but it always sounded like making excuses. "I saved a child's life" seemed to matter less than she didn't follow proper procedures. The world of employment was black and white, and there was no room for the gray area where heroism lived. The rent notice had arrived yesterday, bright, yellow and impossible to ignore. 30 days to pay or face eviction. Lisa had never been late on rent in her entire adult life, but now she was staring at homelessness in the face. She had exactly $73 left in her checking account after buying groceries that would last maybe a week if she stretched them carefully. Jake and Amy had no idea how bad things had gotten. Lisa worked hard to keep their routine as normal as possible, but kids notice things. They noticed that dinner portions had gotten smaller. They noticed that their mom said no to small treats at the grocery store that she used to buy without thinking. They noticed that she spent a lot of time on her laptop with a worried expression. "Mom, why do you look sad all the time now?" Amy had asked just yesterday, her 6-year-old eyes full of concern that no child should have to carry. Lisa had forced a smile and changed the subject, but the question haunted her. How do you explain to your children that the world sometimes punishes people for doing the right thing? How do you tell them that their mother is considered unemployable because she chose to save someone else's child? The medical bills from her emergency room visit had started arriving too, even with her insurance, which would end at the month's close. The co-pays and deductibles added up to over $800, money she simply didn't have. The hospital's billing department had called twice this week, their voices professionally polite but insistent. Lisa had swallowed her pride and applied for temporary assistance programs, but the bureaucracy moved slower than her bills accumulated. Food stamps would help, but the waiting list for housing assistance was months long. Meanwhile, her landlord had bills to pay too, and understanding only went so far. The worst part was the isolation. Her former co-workers from the school district had stopped calling after the first week, not because they didn't care, but because her situation made everyone uncomfortable. She represented the thing that working people feared most, that following your conscience could destroy your life in an instant. Mrs. Williams had been a godsend, watching the kids after school without being asked and occasionally showing up with casseroles that she claimed were extras she had made. But Lisa knew her elderly neighbor was stretching her own fixed income to help, and the guilt was almost unbearable. The job search had become a full-time occupation in itself. Lisa spent 8 hours a day online, filling out applications, customizing cover letters, and attending virtual interviews that led nowhere. She had expanded her search far beyond security work, applying for retail positions, administrative jobs, anything that might pay enough to keep her family housed and fed. One particularly crushing rejection had come from a grocery store chain. The manager had seemed interested during their phone conversation until he called her previous employer. "I'm sorry," he had said when he called back. "We can't take the risk of hiring someone with your employment history." Her employment history, as if saving a child's life was somehow a black mark that would follow her forever. The laptop screen glowed in the darkness as Lisa scrolled through job listings she had already seen a dozen times. Remote work opportunities that required skills she didn't have. Entry-level positions that paid less than unemployment benefits. Part-time jobs that wouldn't cover even half of her expenses. She had started selling things, small items at first. Her grandmother's jewelry, some electronics she didn't really need, clothes that were too nice for her new reality. But there was only so much she could sell before the apartment started looking empty, and the children started asking questions. The worst moment had come earlier that week when Jake had approached her with his piggy bank. "Mom, you can have my birthday money. If it helps," he had said, his 8-year-old face serious and worried. The $23 in crumpled bills and coins represented months of saved allowance and birthday gifts, and the fact that he was willing to give it up had broken something inside Lisa that she wasn't sure could be repaired. She had hugged him tight and told him to keep his money, that everything would be okay. But the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. How could she promise everything would be okay when she had no idea how to make that happen? The support from the community had been touching but brief. A few neighbors had organized a small fundraiser at the local community center, raising about $600 that had helped with groceries and utilities for a couple of weeks. Maya's parents had tried to give her money, but Lisa had refused, not wanting to burden the family that had already been through enough trauma. Some nights, usually around 3 a.m. when the despair felt heaviest, Lisa wondered if she should have made a different choice that day on the playground. The thought felt like betrayal both to Maya and to her own values, but the practical reality was undeniable. If she had followed protocol, she would still have a job. Her children would still have security. Maya might be dead, but Jake and Amy would have a stable home. The guilt of even thinking such thoughts was overwhelming. But hunger and homelessness had a way of making people question everything they thought they knew about right and wrong. Dawn was starting to creep through the kitchen window as Lisa finally closed the laptop. In a few hours, she would wake the children, make them breakfast from whatever was left in the refrigerator, and send them off to school with smiles and hugs, and promises that everything was fine. Then she would return to her computer and continue the seemingly endless search for someone, somewhere, who would take a chance on a woman whose only crime was caring too much about a child's life. The irony wasn't lost on her that she had spent 3 years protecting other people's children, only to find herself unable to protect her own from the consequences of her choices. Lisa was scraping the last bit of peanut butter from the jar for Jake's lunch when the doorbell rang at exactly 7 a.m. She paused, knife in hand, wondering who could possibly be visiting at this hour. The morning light filtered through her kitchen window, highlighting the stack of unpaid bills that had become a permanent fixture on her counter. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door, still wearing her old pajamas and a robe that had seen better days. Through the peephole, she could see a woman in a crisp navy blue suit standing on her doorstep, holding a leather briefcase and what looked like official documents. Lisa's heart sank. Another bill collector, probably. Or maybe someone from the apartment complex with more bad news about the eviction notice. She almost didn't answer, but something about the woman's posture seemed different from the usual debt collectors who had been visiting lately. "Mrs. Lisa Martinez?" the woman asked when Lisa finally opened the door, keeping the chain lock attached. "Yes, that's me." Lisa's voice came out smaller than she intended. My name is Catherine Walsh, and I'm a representative from the White House Office of Presidential Correspondence. May I come in? I have some very important information to share with you. Lisa blinked hard, certain she had misheard. The White House? Yes, ma'am. I know this is unexpected, but I promise you'll want to hear what I have to say. With shaking hands, Lisa removed the chain lock and opened the door wider. The woman stepped inside, her professional demeanor softening slightly as she took in Lisa's modest apartment. I'm sorry to disturb you so early, but we wanted to reach you before this became public knowledge. Catherine opened her briefcase and pulled out an official-looking letter with a presidential seal at the top. 3 weeks ago, a letter arrived at the White House addressed directly to the president. It was from David Chen, Maya Rodriguez's father. Lisa's knees nearly gave out at the mention of Maya's name. She hadn't heard anything about the little girl since that terrible day, and she often wondered how she was doing. Mr. Chen is a decorated Army veteran who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, Catherine continued. In his letter, he described what you did for his daughter in detail. He told the president that while he had seen many acts of courage during his military service, he had never witnessed anything as selfless as a security guard, risking her life to save a child she barely knew. Lisa sank into her worn couch, trying to process what she was hearing. Maya's father wrote to the president? He did more than that. He researched what happened to you afterward. He discovered that you were fired for saving his daughter's life, and he was outraged. His letter was very persuasive, and it made its way directly to the president's desk. Catherine sat down across from Lisa and handed her the official letter. The President of the United States would like to award you the Presidential Citizens Medal for exceptional service in the interest of your fellow citizens. The ceremony will take place next week at the White House. Lisa stared at the letter, reading the same words over and over again. Presidential Citizens Medal, White House ceremony, recognition for her service. It felt like a dream, like something that happened to other people in movies or news stories. There's more, Catherine said gently. The president was deeply troubled to learn about your current situation. A hero who saves a child's life should not be punished for her courage. He has personally intervened to ensure that your circumstances change immediately. What do you mean? Catherine pulled out another set of documents. First, there is a presidential scholarship fund being established for your children's education. Jake and Amy will have their college expenses fully covered when the time comes. Second, the Secret Service has reviewed your background and experience, and they would like to offer you a position in their training program. Lisa's head was spinning. The Secret Service wants to hire me? Your actions at Riverside Elementary demonstrated exactly the kind of quick thinking and protective instincts they value most. The position comes with an excellent salary, full benefits, and the opportunity to advance within federal law enforcement. You would start training next month at their facility in Virginia. The woman in the suit smiled for the first time since arriving. Mrs. Martinez, your financial struggles are over. The scholarship fund comes with an immediate grant to help with your current expenses, and your Secret Service salary will begin as soon as you accept the position. Lisa looked around her small apartment, at the bills on the counter and the nearly empty refrigerator, and felt tears starting to build in her eyes. Is this really happening? It absolutely is. The president wanted me to tell you personally that America needs more people like you. People who put children's safety above their own job security. People who do the right thing even when it costs them everything. Jake appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mom? Who's here? Lisa wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. Jake, this is Mrs. Walsh. She has some very good news for our family. The 8-year-old looked curious but not entirely awake. Good news? Your mom is a hero, young man, Catherine said warmly. And heroes deserve to be recognized for their courage. Over the next hour, Catherine explained all the details. The White House ceremony would be attended by Maya and her family, who specifically requested to be there. The media would cover the event, finally telling Lisa's side of the story. The Presidential Citizens Medal was one of the highest honors a civilian could receive, and it would change how future employers viewed her background. The president also wanted me to give you this message personally, Catherine said as she prepared to leave. He said that true heroes don't choose the safe path or the easy path. They choose the right path, no matter what it costs them. Your decision that day represents the very best of American values. After Catherine left, Lisa sat in her kitchen holding the official letters, still hardly believing they were real. She called Mrs. Williams first, who screamed so loudly with joy that Lisa had to hold the phone away from her ear. Then she called Maya's parents, who cried with happiness and told her they had been praying for something good to happen to her. The days leading up to the White House ceremony passed in a blur of preparations and interviews. News outlets that had ignored her story before were suddenly very interested in talking to the woman who had saved a child and lost everything, only to be recognized by the president himself. On the day of the ceremony, Lisa stood in the Oval Office wearing a new dress that the White House staff had helped her select. Jake and Amy stood beside her, wide-eyed and amazed at the grandeur around them. Maya and her parents were there too, and when the little girl saw Lisa, she ran across the room and hugged her tight. "You saved me," Maya whispered, and Lisa knew that no matter what happened next, that moment made everything worthwhile. The president himself placed the medal around Lisa's neck and spoke about the importance of ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Lisa Martinez reminds us that heroism isn't about having special powers or advanced training, he said to the gathered audience. It's about having the courage to do what's right when it matters most. As Lisa stood there receiving applause from some of the most powerful people in the country, she thought about that terrible day on the playground and the choice she had made in a split second. She had lost her job, faced financial ruin, and questioned everything she thought she knew about justice and fairness. But Maya was alive, standing right there in the audience with a bright smile on her face. And sometimes, that was worth more than anything else in the world.